The Battle of Waterloo, described by the Duke of Wellington as the nearest run thing you ever saw, stands as a decisive moment that reshaped European politics. This conflict not only marked the culmination of a series of wars that ravaged the continent, but also set the stage for a new era of balance and stability. Here, the intricate maneuvers and strategic decisions of this battle will be explored, as each move held significant consequences for the future of Europe. In the early months of 1815, Europe was on edge. The continent had been shaken by over 2 decades of conflict, but with the abdication of Napoleon Bonaparte in April 1814 and his subsequent exile to the Mediterranean island of Elba, a fragile peace had begun to settle across the nations. This peace, however, was to be short-lived. In a daring escape in February 1815, Napoleon returned to France, igniting a dramatic resurgence of power known as the 100 Days. As he landed at Gulf Juan, the deposed emperor was greeted by cheering soldiers and citizens, quickly amassing an army as he marched towards Paris. By March, he had entered the capital, reclaiming his throne without firing a single shot, as the reigning King Louis XVIII fled. The return of Napoleon spurred the European powers into action. The Congress of Vienna, which had been in session since September 1814 to redraw the boundaries and politics of a post-Napoleonic Europe, quickly declared him an outlaw. In response, the Seventh Coalition was formed, uniting Britain, Prussia, Russia, Austria, and several smaller countries against him. Each of these powers began mobilizing their armies, determined to end Napoleon's rule once and for all. The strategic positioning prior to the battle was crucial. Napoleon knew he had to disrupt the Allied forces before they could consolidate. He aimed to separate the British, led by the Duke of Wellington, and the Prussians, under Field Marshal Gebhard Leberecht von Blücher, and defeat them individually. Wellington positioned his troops along a ridge near the village of Waterloo in Belgium, creating a defensive line that stretched from the Chateau of Hogemont in the west to the farm of Papillote to the east. His choice of high ground and fortified farmhouses strengthened his defensive posture. Meanwhile, Napoleon concentrated his forces south of Wellington's line, near the town of Charleroi. His plan was marked by characteristic audacity. By moving swiftly, he hoped to wedge his army between the British and Prussians, defeating Wellington before turning to face Blücher's forces, which were still en route. As both sides prepared for what they knew would be a decisive showdown, the stage was set for one of the greatest battles in European military history, with each commander aware that the outcome could reshape the continent's political landscape for generations to come. As the battle loomed, Napoleon's army, assembled with speed and precision, numbered around 73,000 troops. This formidable force comprised his loyal veterans from various elite regiments, including the revered Imperial Guard. Notably, the army was organized into several corps, each led by experienced marshals whom Napoleon trusted implicitly. Key figures included Marshal Ney, known for his fearless leadership, and Marshal Soult, a strategic mastermind, both critical to executing Napoleon's battle plans. Opposing Napoleon, the Duke of Wellington commanded an allied army of about 68,000 men. This coalition force was a diverse amalgam that included British, Dutch, and Belgian troops, as well as smaller contingents from various German principalities. Despite its diversity and the uneven experience among its ranks, Wellington's leadership was a unifying force. His strategic acumen was evident in his choice of terrain and defensive preparations, which utilized the ridge at Waterloo to maximize his army's effectiveness. Meanwhile, Prussian Field Marshal Gebhard Leberecht von Blücher led a force of 50,000 troops, positioned to join Wellington's forces. Known for his relentless pursuit and aggressive tactics, Blücher's role was pivotal. His forces were crucial in the Allied strategy, planning to support Wellington by attacking Napoleon's right flank, potentially turning the tide of the battle. The strategies of these commanders reflected their distinct military doctrines and personal experiences. Napoleon sought a swift, decisive victory to disrupt the coalition before it could fully assemble. In contrast, Wellington and Blücher aimed for a drawn-out battle, exploiting their growing numerical superiority and coordination. As these experienced leaders maneuvered their forces, they set the stage for a monumental confrontation. The upcoming clash at Waterloo promised not only to determine the fate of these armies, but also to reshape the political landscape of Europe for decades to come. As dawn broke on June 18, 1815, the atmosphere was tense with the imminent conflict. Napoleon initiated the battle by ordering an artillery barrage against Wellington's forces, positioned along the ridge of Mont Saint-Jean. This preliminary bombardment was meant to soften up the Allied defenses before the main assault. As the cannonade echoed across the battlefield, Napoleon's troops prepared for their first major maneuver, a direct attack on Hougoumont Farm, a strategic point on Wellington's right flank. This diversionary attack was intended to draw reserves away from the main line, weakening the Allied center for a decisive blow. The battle at Hougoumont would prove to be a microcosm of the larger struggle, fierce, prolonged, and costly. Despite repeated French assaults, the garrison, composed of British guards, held firm, turning the farm into a deadly trap for French soldiers. The resilience of Hougoumont defenders inadvertently thwarted Napoleon's plan to quickly break Wellington's line. Meanwhile, the center of the battlefield witnessed a series of heavy infantry assaults by the French. Waves of French soldiers advanced under a hail of artillery and musket fire, targeting key points along the Allied line. The fighting was brutal and the casualties high. Notably, Le Haye-Saint, another fortified farm, became a focal point of contention. Its capture would have given Napoleon a significant advantage, providing a breach in Wellington's defenses. However, the steadfastness of the defenders, combined with logistical missteps by the French, kept it in Allied hands for much of the day. Throughout the afternoon, as the battle raged, the situation remained fluid and uncertain. Napoleon's forces achieved partial successes, capturing positions but failing to deliver a crushing blow. Wellington's line bent under pressure, but crucially did not break. Each side's resolve was tested as they awaited the arrival of the Prussian army, whose approach threatened to tip the balance of this epic confrontation. The afternoon of June 18, 1815, saw the Battle of Waterloo reach its climax as key turning points unfolded on the battlefield. The arrival of Prussian forces under Field Marshal Blücher was one such critical moment that began to tilt the scales against Napoleon. Earlier in the day, the Prussians had engaged French forces at Wavre, which delayed their arrival at Waterloo. However, by mid-afternoon, the 1st Prussian Corps had begun to arrive, exerting additional pressure on Napoleon's right flank. Reacting to the Prussian threat, Napoleon was forced to divert significant resources to stem their advance, resources that were critically needed in his main effort against Wellington's line. This diversion weakened his offensive power at a crucial juncture and allowed Wellington to stabilize his forces and prepare for continued resistance. As the Prussian forces incrementally entered the fray, they reinvigorated the Allied defense with their numbers and determination. This psychological boost to the Allies was palpable, as troops who had been holding the line against relentless French attacks now found new reserves of strength. Simultaneously, the Imperial Guard, Napoleon's elite reserve, was committed to what would become their final charge. This decision was made in desperation as Napoleon sought to break Wellington's center and force a decisive conclusion. The Guard advanced with their customary discipline and courage, attacking the Allied center at a time when the battle seemed balanced on a knife edge. However, despite their fearsome reputation, the Imperial Guard met stiff resistance. Wellington had anticipated such a move and prepared his infantry squares to repel the assault. Under intense musket and cannon fire, the Guard faltered and ultimately retreated, a sight that was unprecedented and deeply demoralizing to the rest of the French forces. The failure of the Imperial Guard's charge marked the definitive turning point of the battle. With their morale shattered and their numbers dwindling, French forces were unable to sustain their offense. The combined weight of Allied resistance and the Prussian reinforcements sealed Napoleon's fate, leading to his eventual defeat and retreat from the field. The Battle of Waterloo, concluded on June 18, 1815, marked a decisive end to Napoleon Bonaparte's rule and dramatically altered the course of European history. As the dust settled and the sounds of battle faded, the immediate aftermath saw tens of thousands of casualties on both sides, making it one of the deadliest battles of the era. Napoleon, witnessing the total collapse of his army, was forced to retreat back to Paris. His return was short-lived, facing political isolation and realizing the futility of continuing resistance. He abdicated for the second time on June 22, just 4 days after the battle. The defeat at Waterloo ended Napoleon's hopes of restoring his empire and led to his exile to the remote island of St. Helena in the South Atlantic, where he would spend the remainder of his life. This exile was far more stringent than the previous one on Elba, ensuring he could no longer pose a threat to European stability. The consequences of Waterloo extended far beyond Napoleon's fate. The victory solidified the reputation of the Duke of Wellington, who would go on to enjoy a distinguished political career, eventually becoming the Prime Minister of Britain. Meanwhile, the Seventh Coalition moved swiftly to restore Louis XVIII to the French throne, re-establishing the Bourbon monarchy and setting the stage for a long period of relative peace in Europe, known as the Concert of Europe. This period saw the major powers of Europe, Britain, Russia, Prussia, Austria, and later France, work together to maintain the balance of power and prevent the rise of a single dominant state. The Congress of Vienna, reconvened after Napoleon's final defeat, implemented a new European order that curtailed French expansionist ambitions and promoted a balance of power that would largely prevent major continental wars for nearly a century. The legacy of Waterloo, therefore, was profound, shaping diplomatic strategies and European borders for generations. It symbolized the end of one era and the beginning of another, characterized by diplomatic engagement rather than military confrontation. As we've seen, the Battle of Waterloo was not just a clash of armies. It was a turning point that reshaped the landscape of Europe. From the strategic maneuvers to the valiant stands and the ultimate fallout, we've journeyed through one of history's most monumental battles. Thank you for joining us on this historical deep dive. Don't miss more epic tales of history. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and stay tuned for more adventures in time.